Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast, focused on providing valuable information for anyone looking to undertake a new build or extension project. We'll share our tips, tricks and stories from a building designer's perspective.
Hello and welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast. I'm your host Amelia, and if you've been following on since last week, we had Toby come in and talk to us about achieving the 6-star energy rating. Now, we had part 1 of the podcast last week, and this episode today is following straight on to part 2. We're going to dive straight in. Enjoy, guys.
So maybe you could explain what is a deemed to satisfy and a performance solution.
Yeah, sure. So we have 3 different ways or categories that we can assess buildings. We have the deemed to satisfy provisions, which is basically a stringent set of rules that the government's put together, and it's sort of like a hard and fast. There's no deviation from it. That it looks at walls, floors, ceilings, and windows, and ceiling and that sort of stuff all separately. It doesn't. You can't combine anything. What by combining I mean maybe you want to put more ceiling insulation in and maybe a little less wall insulation. You can't do that with deemed to satisfy. And the windows are also worked out separately. Then if we go to and I should add, probably 5% of buildings actually work, like commercially work through that method.
Oh, exactly. I'm amazed how many get past. Let's not go there.
Yeah,
well, a spreadsheet. So anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
I think building surveyors are getting a little better at picking up on the ones that are legitimate, and maybe
others might be
a little
not.
less. Yep. So then I suppose we move into the second form of assessment, and that is the NAFERS assessment, or like a lot of people call it the star system or 6-star system. And it's
good though, because a lot of people recognise that.
They do. They've actually done quite a good job at getting that branding, I suppose, and that information out to people, because we do get a lot of people that ask about it, especially when we move to performance solutions, for example. They said, what's my star rating going to be? And
exactly.
And we'll get to that in a sec, but that it doesn't apply as much in that area. So with NAFERS, we model the building as if it's a sort of like if you were doing a 3D. And we model the building in our specialised software. It has postcode and temperature profiles for every postcode in Australia. And so when we load that in, it loads climate-specific data into the program so that it knows where the building's going to be built, and then we model it, and it knows the orientation, it knows things like trees, shading, other houses around the area, all that kind of thing. And then it will work out what that star rating is based off a band that's been preset by NAFERS.
Yep.
Our minimum is 6, like we've talked about, and many states are moving to 7 now. And the idea behind it is that we can make up that star rating in lots of different ways. So as long as we meet the minimum, we can put single glazed windows if we want to, or if it works, and have more insulation in the ceilings and the floors and things like that. So we can really mix and match the specification to make it more tailored to each building. And that's where we do 90% of our work, really.
Yeah, and we've always used services like yours. We've never gone down the deemed to satisfy, because I think it actually gives you a tangible result.
Correct, yeah.
Because that star rating, you can see it on your electrical appliances, you can see it on a range of things. So you've got that consistency, and it's a measurable, easy to understand.
Yep. And I think too, there's been a lot of talk about mandatory disclosure over the past, especially the past 5 years. It's been really heating up. And
you might want to explain what mandatory disclosure is, because
mandatory disclosure is a really interesting one. It's been on the government's radar, and it's in ACT at the moment. It's been running for many years.
And successful?
And successful, yep. There's always challenges with these programs and how they roll out, but the idea behind it is that if you buy or sell a home, or really, let's just say if you sell a home, you have to disclose the star figure of that home. And the idea behind that is that you can be looking at two different buildings, and one might be 2 stars and one might be 6 stars. They might have comparable outlooks and things like that, but you can actually know roughly how well that house rates thermally. And
because you can check the power bills, but it doesn't actually say how thermally comfort is.
That's right.
You might be someone that, bit of a tight ass, never turn the heaters on, wears two or three jumpers on at night, and they're okay with that. They're happy as Larry because their power bill's low. But this actually gives you an idea of how this might perform. So how you choose to use the house. Yeah,
and it really is that they want to try and use it as a benchmarking tool. So the idea is that everyone has a rating on their house, and then when you buy and sell, you just have more information about that building. I'm pretty passionate about it in a different way, but that's in the form of rentals. Yeah. I think that it would make a really big difference in people looking for rentals and understanding...
That's if there's enough available.
Well, yes, at the moment it's a challenge.
I really feel for people at the moment. It is totally brutal. Just trying to find something.
It's really difficult at the moment. It's challenging times, that's for sure.
Oh, yes.
And the challenge with that is that I suppose you got to take whatever you can get. Where normally you should really have the selection of 3 or 4 rentals, like that would, when I was growing up, that's
that's
pretty
right.
Normal.
And most of the time we chose it because it's close to the pub.
That's right.
Or maybe only Frank looks at that.
Oh, well.
It's a fair comment.
So why are unis so close to pubs?
Oh, that is a good question.
Or do the pubs move out to them?
Savvy business owners.
Yeah, very true.
I reckon the owner's in on all of it. The pub, the rentals, all of it.
Oh, clever.
They got it.
You're right.
They got it figured out. Yeah.
Well done. Captive audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the idea behind the rental side of it would be that they can look at 2 different buildings, and let's say one is $250 a week. It'd be nice to get a rental for that, but let's just use those.
Do they still exist at the moment?
Not sure anymore.
Maybe double it.
Yeah. Okay, let's say $500 a week and $700 a week. The $700 one might be a nicer house for that money. And it might have a different outlook or a different location and things like that. Yeah, could have a pool. But we have no idea how much it costs to heat and cool at that point.
And also just looking at your level what you're comfortable with too.
Correct. So if that house for the $500 actually costs, I don't know, $200 a fortnight more to heat and cool, then that brings it up much closer to the $700 one that might be cheaper. So being able to compare properly, especially in the rental market, would make a huge difference to people in normal circumstances.
But even then, I think it's a wise thing to do. You know, the sad thing, I'm pretty sure in Tassie, it was looked at about 11 years ago. They were seriously doing it, but it got scuttled because they made it too complicated.
Yep.
And I'm glad the ACT are doing it. Shows that it can be done. Keep it simple.
Yes, it's a challenging one because I think the biggest challenge to it is trying to work out what the confines are.
Certainly.
How far do we go with it? We've seen the government's insulation scheme and how that got rolled out.
And the idea was brilliant.
Brilliant idea. Yes.
Execution, bit poor.
Yeah.
And it's a real, and it was a shame. Then the media got, that's my opinion, media got hold of it and ruined it.
Yes.
You know, and it was really sad. It had so much potential to change housing.
Yes, and that was I suppose their last real foray into energy efficiency for housing and like the government side of it. So I think that they're probably a little bit wary about having another crack at trying to get something like this.
But I think how it's going to go now is that it's going to come down to pure economics of upping the performance of your house.
Yep.
And if to be able to measure your house and then to be able to improve it because you can retrospectively install insulation and improve the performance, and then it'll have a direct cost benefit on everyone's power usage, because the power's going up all over Australia.
Yep.
It's not projected to go down, regardless of what the pollies are telling you. They're shutting down more power stations, not building new stuff fast enough. I haven't figured that out yet. It's just pure numbers. Get rid of a power station when you're replacing with a battery. So what's filling the battery?
Have we thought about that?
Yeah, so how let's buy some solar panels. Yeah. Sorry, that's digressing a bit. But you can certainly improve the performance of your house. Sealing it up better, all that type of stuff. Hopefully not affecting your condensation.
Correct. And I suppose where it gets really interesting is with the rental side of it, they talked about having minimum star ratings to be able to rent. So we've already got rules now where you have to have fixed heating appliances for rentals, and I think that was a really good move forward, because a lot of people would get into a rental and they didn't have an AC or anything.
So then they
put a car heater in the corner.
It costs you a fortune.
Costs a fortune, and it's always the people that get pushed into those situations that can't afford it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's really I see it as pretty unfair. So that move I think was really positive. And the talk around the rental and the star figures has been, okay, well, maybe we should have a minimum star figure for people to rent their building out, because that makes it fairer on, the person coming in. And I think that's probably a pretty good move forward, especially when we've got rising prices and also pressure on the power grid, because we're not using less energy these days, we're using more.
Because we keep buying these stupid devices, don't we? Amongst other things.
That's right.
And our thermal comfort. Yeah.
Yep.
But then there should be other programs to have more solar power feeding into the house to subsidise that.
Yeah, correct.
So there's a couple of things we can do. We can solve the world's problems here.
Next time on solving the world's problems. No, so that's, I suppose, and those thermal, just pulling back to, I suppose, the thermal tools, they're great for that type of work, being able to work out what the usage is of a house and how that works. And that's that NAFA's tool line that we talk about. It was built by the CSIRO a lot of years ago, and it's had a lot of iterations since then, but at its core, it's actually a very, very good tool for being able to assess thermal performance in not just residential buildings really, but just in materials in general. Yeah.
As long as the material suppliers get it tested, isn't it? As we spoke before,
we were just talking about that, weren't we?
Yeah, they need to spend the money to get it tested so it can be put into the software, so it's all on a level playing field.
Correct.
It's not this black magic. It's this, my product performs it, it's R35.
Yes.
Carry on that we've heard over these guys selling snake oil to us. They need to put their money on the line, back their product, get it tested, and then it can be entered into the software correctly.
It's the same problem. It's the same thing with Windows. We have a huge window library that we can attach into, and that is a part of an online resource that's also readily available for anyone to look up. But if it's not tested, then you don't know what the figures are, so you can't use it. I had this conversation with a client only last week, where the window manufacturer sent through what they were going to install, and I said, that's great. It was aluminium double glazed. There wasn't really any detail around it, and they said, "Oh, look, what are the values of the glass?" And they've got, we don't know because the glass is X, because they always know the glass. But I said, no, what's the system value? Or the whole thing.
It's all about the system,
right? And they didn't know, and so I had to say to the client, well, if they can't tell you what it is, then technically you can't use it, because you don't know, you can't prove to the building surveyor or anyone else what those windows are.
If you can't prove a value, if it's not measurable, how can anyone assess it to say that it's suitable, meets the minimum Australian standards?
Correct.
So are you saying that double glazed, there are different values of double glazed? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely, and that's certainly a I suppose we'll delve down the can of worms a little bit with that, but there's I always have a great example because I've got two windows in my office. One's a single glazed window and one's a double glazed window, and they're actually thermal performance. They're exactly the same. So the single glazed window in a certain manufacturer is this equivalent performance to a double glazed window in another
Go
manufacturer.
figure that out.
That's mind blowing, really.
It is rather like, what the heck?
And that's probably the biggest challenge that we have as thermal performance assessors, is that education around windows is so paramount, because when double glazing came out, that was it was like the earmark or the fix for everything. Like you said with your place, you stretched and you got double glazing, but the challenge is that if you have single glazed timber, which we have in a lot of houses still.
The old red brick 60s homes, the post-war homes.
Yeah.
With
Lots
no
of
rubber
maintenance.
but no rubber seals on them though.
No, so if we take air tightness, let's take air tightness out of it, because that's a conversation for another. And maintenance is obviously another one.
There's huge windows with 3mm glass.
Yes, that's it. The old float glass.
Yeah, old float
beautiful
glass.
Stuff. That actually performs, in general terms, better than double glazed aluminium, in general terms. So your single glazed timber is better than your double glazed aluminium. Now, air tightness out the door, acoustic value, the double glaze will always work better. It just does naturally. There's other things, but if we're just talking about thermal performance, the single glazed is actually better. And that's a real touchy point, and something that a lot of people don't realise.
But it's verified by testing.
100%.
It's not all smoke and mirrors. It's actually tested.
Correct.
So if you've got a manufacturer's got a window and they're claiming all this stuff, show the data to someone with experience.
Yep.
Is this good?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Not?
And so we measure that. We have a measurement called a U value, and every window system that's certified or used on the market has to have a U value attached to it. And glass has a U value as well. So U is basically just a way of measuring insulative properties, but in the windows, not in, say, insulation, for example.
Now, we'll talk about that later, why it doesn't have an R value, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Yes. Look, and this, I think some of the terminology around all this is actually what confuses people as well, because
definitely.
we talk about different things, and then America also talks about their R values different to us, so because they use imperial for that part, but
they're still using stone tablets to do,
Right, so we get these challenges that happen especially in the terminology, but with double glazed windows, they're not all built the same. One manufacturer can have a different frame or a different type of frame and how they build it, or a section, and another one with a different one, and they'll have totally different values for the same window or the same glass. And that's something that it's difficult for people to sort of get their head around, I suppose. And it even goes one step further, because as the glass gets bigger, the U value changes as well. Well, we try and stick to universal figures because it's just easier to talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about how easy it was to understand housing with star ratings. You got the U value for the windows, you got R values for the walls and the ceiling and the floor, but the big holes are at a different rating.
Yes.
Someone told me that was purely for a marketing purpose.
Maybe onto something.
Because how that's perceived. Because if you actually put an R rating against these windows...
Yeah, it doesn't look very good.
They look like rubbish, don't they?
They do. Look, and funnily enough, glass in its pure form, on its own, rates quite well. We've done a couple of houses that have been all glass, so all glass, just glass boxes.
I wanted to have to go with something like that.
Yeah, and they were really challenging, especially when we were working with window manufacturers and how that was going to work. And What we ended up doing was we recessed the glass into the frames.
Right.
So we effectively didn't have a window frame.
It wasn't exposed. So
Correct.
it goes straight into the floor, into the ceiling, so the heat can't go through.
Correct.
There's limited going through the frame.
Yeah. So and to give you an example of the performance, I suppose a normal double glazed aluminium window has a U value of around 4, average. A double glazed timber has a U value of around 3, and the lower the better. Glass itself,
which is opposite to the R ratings.
You got it. And then the glass itself has, say, just a double glazed standard painted glass is around a U value of 1. So compared to the 4 that it started with the aluminium frame, the glass on its own is 3 times better.
So and that's why the frames are so expensive at times to get high performance windows.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And that's why advancements in PVC have been important. Europe, we see that happening all the time. UPVC is around a U value of 2.
Yeah, right.
On average.
And they're huge too.
Yeah. Yep. It's just because that thermal movement doesn't happen as fast in the plastic as it does in steel or aluminium or whatever. Yeah. So, quite interesting.
Yeah, lots of interesting things. And it's worth going to lots of different manufacturers to look at their products.
Definitely.
And then talking to your designer, which will then generally work with your thermal assessor.
Yes.
Because we've done a couple of times where, hey, we've got a project, we want to hit a certain star rating.
Correct.
And you come on as part of the design team and come in really early to help us with that. And sometimes the star rating doesn't work, but if we do a performance assessment, which is a lot of work,
yes,
and rightly so, you're modelling it quite differently.
Correct.
You can actually understand the performance of the house so much better and get more accurate ratings on that. So then you can choose I won't call it a lesser window, but a less expensive option to give you can prove the performance that's required under that performance rating.
Yeah, correct. So performance solutions are quite interesting, and they're very, I suppose, specialised. You have to be a geothermal engineer to be able to perform those ratings to start with. Like a normal NATHERS assessor can't do them. And the idea behind it is that we create 2 models of your building that you're building. One's called a reference building, and one's our building that we want to build. The reference building uses items out of the deemed to satisfy, which is that first method. So we actually assess it under that first
method. So do the standard 2.9 in the walls as a system.
Yep.
4 in the ceiling, 2.5 on the floor if it's an elevator. So it's just all the standard stuff.
All the standard stuff, but we apply that to your design. And then what we do is we work out the energy usage, heating and cooling, over a 12-month period. And it's just a set of numbers, and they're like our benchmark. Then the idea is that we can take our proposed building and we can upgrade our walls and ceilings and change the insulation around and do whatever. We can use some shading devices on windows if something's getting too warm, or we can use different blinds and things like that. And as long as our overall usage for that building, the proposed building, is less than the one of the first one we did, the reference building, then we're compliant.
Gotcha.
Yeah, right. So it's a different method, and it doesn't correlate with star ratings or anything like that. It's something that sits right out on its own. But what it's really good for, we get the question a bit when we go into performance solution areas and say, look, my house is only 4.4 star. How are you going to make it 6 star with a performance solution? So, well, we're not. We're going to assess it under a different method, and therefore it's going to come out differently. And they said, but are we going to get a lesser house out of that? Are we going to get a poorer performing house? So, well, to answer that accurately and to get some understanding, I suppose what you have to understand is that the NATHERS system, that main one that we use all the time, the 6 star system, that was developed long ago by the CSIRO, like we've spoken about. And what we used basically boxes in New South Wales. They created 6 boxes, and they were homes, tiny little, just single rooms. And what we did is they put temperature sensors all over them, and they used different insulations, and they worked out reference points for all these things. And then they developed that into a program that then we now use today. The challenge with that is that we get some weird and wonderful designs, as
I call it black magic sometimes. We send something through, fail, and we go, why, it's no different to the other one. And then we do another one similar.
Yep.
Passes. What's the go?
Yep. And out of thousands and thousands of houses that we've rated, we start to see patterns. And those patterns normally align with H-shaped houses or L-shaped houses or things with wings and things like that. They're not very well suited to NAFTAs. And
like that one we got you to do performance assessment.
Correct.
That H-shaped one.
Right? It's right up the alley.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
big scanty barn with big voids and
they're beautiful houses, don't get me wrong, and the thing that we have to be really careful of is that we're assessors and not designers. So for us, we could say, oh yeah, you can get this to work, but you need to make all the windows smaller. Yep. Right? And that's a solution for us, but it's not necessarily a solution for the client or for for you guys and your outcome.
But it's a way to discuss with the client to get this to work, reducing size of the windows in the certain locations.
Yes, and it has to happen sometimes because maybe we are overglazed. But the idea behind the performance solution is that it covers off on those buildings that are a bit out of the ordinary. They're a bit strange and,
but it's surprising how many we do.
A lot.
Because everyone wants something special and they've got every right to.
Yep.
And the Scandy barn, as I mentioned, that's popular at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's great. But because of the volume you're dealing with and the size of the glass at the ends, because that's the look, it makes it so hard to get it to perform.
It does. And that's always the challenge, because when we get to things that are out of the ordinary, it's sort of like the 3-bedroom brick veneer is like the sweet spot of everything, for engineering, for design.
Well, like those 2-bedroom units we do for social housing.
Yep.
Man, they perform.
Yeah,
they're unbelievable,
awesome, aren't they? Yeah, over 7 stars, like easy.
They're crazy.
Yep. But then we get these ones that are out in the ordinary, but they're like really your picturesque homes. Like they're beautiful
custom.
Spaces.
They're custom.
And we've just found that those types of shapes and sizes and things like that, they're just not accustomed to NAFTAs. They're much better in the performance solution area. And it's not that they're a bad house or that you're going to get a subpar house out of it. It's that they don't fit in that box very well,
So from our perspective as designers, we love getting you involved early. So if you were wanting a really high performance house, because let's just look at the star ratings. You get up in the 8s. We get clients come, I want an 8-star house. Mm-hmm. Would you recommend to plan around a performance solution rather than on the NATA's 8-star?
It really depends. It depends on the design of the house, ultimately. We're just talking about, the different shapes and things like that. So if it's something that's fairly, I suppose, standard in shape, we would go down the NAFTA's area first.
Sure.
And we've just started creating these new reports. We call them optimization reports, but the idea is that we look at every room in the house and we work out the star rating for that room. And the idea behind that is that we can understand which rooms are poorer performing. And then we can work with those, say, okay, well, this is a recent one was a media room on the west side, had a huge big picture window in it, no shade.
Facing west?
Facing west.
Oh.
And it was overheating, right?
Oh, really? What a surprise.
Who would have thought? So
you could do marshmallows up against the window, couldn't you? so get crazy hot.
Yeah, and it was quite a big room, and like more like a lounge room, I suppose. And most of the other rooms in the house were mid-7 star. This room was 4.4, right?
Wow.
And normally, with our normal assessment, you don't pick up on that because it's looking at it as a whole thing, not as an individual room. So these new reports that we're doing have been really good for being able to identify a poor performing area or poor performing areas, and then working on strategies on how to deal with those. So then you might have let's say that house was mid-6s. By the time we've fixed the media room and we've done a few other things, we get into this, the mid-7s.
Okay, that's interesting, because then you can work on the overshadowing and protection of the glass,
correct,
the sun.
Yep.
Because it used to be passive solar was the buzzword.
Yes.
20 years ago. Now it's passive house.
Yep.
And they're all still very valid, all these things.
Yep.
But the better the tools are, so you can individually assess each room, you can then adjust glazing, protection.
Correct.
The insulation, how you do it.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And even looking at that particular window it might be in that room to say, okay, they might want, there's a view out there, so they don't want to touch the size of the thing, but we might upgrade the spec on that window to help offset the size of it in that room and things like that. But they're things that we could never look at before because we weren't really measuring it. We're looking at the data and saying, okay, the overall star rating is X. It complies, it doesn't comply. Now it's, okay, well, this building is X and these 3 rooms are really poor performing, so let's work on those.
Yeah, sure.
Things like that. So.
That's great.
So are there any take-homes for any people that are looking to build a new house or even do an extension or something like that? What are the things that they need to ask? What are the things they need to look at? And are there any resources available?
Yes, good question. I suppose if you're building a new house, the block is the starting point. It's such the starting and the end point nearly. Like, if you are buying a south-facing block, you're going to have trouble from the start. Even if you have the fantastic design that Frank's knocked up and everything's perfect, you're still going to struggle because of the outlook and the way that block is. So always trying to find a block that fits that nice northerly orientation, not too much overshadowing from other buildings and things like that is really important. And I think that, on a side note, developers probably should have a bit more control. The council should have a little more control over the developers in that area.
And then that comes down to the surveyors.
It does, and it's really challenging because we do always in every subdivision we get some really nice blocks and we get some really poor ones. So
the runs of the litter.
Yeah, that's right, and maybe that's all you can afford to, and that's okay. But you need to then design to that block. If you've got a south-facing block, don't try and put a massive building on it.
But sometimes, like in Tassie, you go out to Westbury and you want to look at the Western Tiers because it's magnificent. It makes it so hard to get it to perform.
Yes, it does. I had one recently with a lady, and it was their retirement home in Victoria. Nicest client in the world. It was south facing, so tiny little north-facing, which was just the driveway really, and the whole back of it was south-facing. And it was onto a golf club. Beautiful outlook, like picturesque outlook. And so she had a whole wall of glazed, the whole thing, 15 metres long.
Oh, wow.
And she said it's non-negotiable because that's what she wants. That's their dream is to have that.
Make it work.
And so we made it work, you know. But you pay the price for that too, you know. It's not like we can work miracles. She had to pay the price somewhere else, which was probably in her windows and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But so I suppose the first thing is the block. It's so important. And then secondary is investing in the design, you know, investing in prime design to come and actually look at it strategically, understand what the outcomes are, understand where it's going to best work, and following their lead a bit, because a lot of the time we have something set in our mind that we want, but it's not necessarily what's going to create a great house either.
For the block that they've potentially chosen.
That's right, yeah.
And we've spoken about, even without the, orientation, we've spoken about so many things about the block. It makes it so critical choosing the right block to suit, and it's such an emotional choice. People go, the block of land, bang, and they haven't thought about so many things.
Correct.
And we offer to look at blocks for people for that direct purpose.
Yep.
Because it is the big piece that if you get that wrong, you're paying for it somewhere, somehow, and it will add cost to your building or your thermal comfort, noise, position, trying to fit a boat on the side of the house, all sorts of crazy stuff, that people think they can do, but they can't.
Yeah.
Or makes it very difficult to do. So we love helping people choose blocks. Or I've had it recently, someone go, I'm looking at these 3 blocks in these subdivisions, which one would you choose? So we understand their brief, what their intention is. It says, look, I'd choose that one because it does all these things. This one won't give you that. And she was very appreciative. And now, because specific in Tasmania, I know the prices in the mainland have already been up, but Tasmanian prices are going through the roof and very equivalent to mainland prices. You need to be smart on your purchase. Really do the research, and most designers, architects will be able to help you with that, and use that to your advantage.
And I think too, once you've got that block decided on and you've got your designer involved, getting a thermal performance assessor involved early is
100%.
It's like our charge in the grand scheme of things is very low. You spend more on insulation than you'll spend on a thermal performance assessor. But the difference in getting us in early is such a huge impact to the rest of the...
Before we go for planning approval,
yeah.
Every time. And if you're aiming for a high performance house as well, it is so much more important than you become part of the design team.
Correct.
So then we can work through the process, do some preliminary assessments, or even when you're assessing each individual room early on. And that's why I asked about the performance solution.
Yes.
Because sometimes, that could be handy spending. It's a lot more money, but at least you know what you're getting in a lot more detail.
And it's relative too, though. Yes, a performance solution is it's much more expensive than the normal NAFTA's rating, but in the grand scheme of, if you're looking at spending $1 million on a home, then the performance solution's very small cost.
Very much so.
Yes. in regards to the overall project. So, I think it's relevant, I suppose, to what you...
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. So, designer and assessor work together. And we've done it heaps of times with yourself and other assessors, and it's always good results. So, yeah.
All right, well, we might wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming in today, Toby. It's been really lovely to learn about thermal assessments and all the things associated with building a house to make it thermally...
Efficient.
Efficient, exactly.
Comfortable.
Yes, comfortable and healthy.
And healthy. See? 3 different things.
Okay, look at that.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you again then.
You're listening to the Building Design Prime Time podcast.